When new cameras are released now, the manufacturers typically rely on 3 or 4 main selling points: megapixels, frames per second shooting, autofocus, and video features. But as I've spoken about in videos before, I think we're very much in the realms of diminishing returns now when it comes to new camera technologies. And that got me thinking, are there things that they can do in the cameras of the future that would really improve our lives as photographers? And I think they're really missing a trick when it comes to innovating. These are a few things that I've thought about that camera companies should look to include in their new releases that I really think will solve genuine problems that we have as photographers. I think a lot of these things would alleviate my personal pain points when it comes to being out and about with my camera. But the last one I'm going to speak about kind of gets a little bit more controversial, or potentially could in the future with the way things are going. So the first idea I've had is to build a tripod plate into the camera. Now, I don't know if this would work or what it would look like, but at the bottom, the base of a camera is a rather featureless flat thing with a screw hole for a tripod plate. Now, the majority of photographers I see now use these Arca Swiss style tripod mounts with these grooves down the side. What if those grooves just went down the entire length of the base of the camera, meaning you wouldn't need to bring one of these with you, and you could just mount your camera as it is onto the tripod? The camera I'm using now is a Sony FX3, and I've got a cage system for that, and the cage goes around the bottom and has these built-in grooves, and that's where I got the idea from. I think it would make life so much easier for so many people, me especially, because I have a habit of forgetting these when I'm out and about, which makes things rather difficult. There's never enough tape available to make it work. I know not everyone uses Arca Swiss tripod plates, so there'd still be a screw hole for you to put whatever plate you wanted into it. But I just think this would make people's lives so much easier. Now, whilst I've got this camera in my hand, I'm going to talk about the screen. And I think every new camera now should have one of these multi-directional screens that you can put in any orientation you wish. This is a Sony a7R5, so it has one as standard, but there are so many cameras coming out now that still don't have a screen like this. They articulate and everything else, but they don't go in all directions. And I just believe this should be a standard feature on cameras now, because this is such a useful feature of this camera. Whilst I'm talking about screens, I think cameras need brighter screens as well. If you compare the brightness of your screen with how bright your smartphone goes, for example, it is like night and day. That's maybe not the best analogy, but it's so different. And sometimes we're using these in really bright conditions and you just can't see the screen very well. That's fine if you've got an EVF and you can look through that instead, but a lot of cameras now don't have EVFs, and the screen brightnesses don't really make up for that in certain conditions. I think Nikon are doing a really good job of this at the moment with some of their recent releases, but certainly in Sony and the a7R5 and the FX3 that I'm using here, the screen brightness is just nowhere near what it should be in this day and age. I think a really good feature that cameras could also have are loadable presets. Presets that you take from your editing software and load into your camera so that you can see what photos will look like with your edits on them as you take them. Now, the FX3, I can load LUTs into the camera. Now, a LUT is basically like an editing preset for video. So I can put the LUT I use to edit my videos into my FX3, and even though I'm filming in log, which is like a flat, ungraded footage, it will show me what the footage will look like with my edits. Why can't we do that with cameras? I mean, there's probably multiple reasons why. For example, Adobe's licensing, people using different editing softwares. LUTs are fairly universal, so they're different. But it feels like that would be a really useful tool to take your Lightroom presets and put them into your camera to be able to see what your images would look like with those presets applied to them, and even baked into JPEGs to make editing easier. That seems like a really easy win. I know Fujifilm have brilliant film simulations, and they also have recipes now which people are sharing online to almost create your own looks within camera, but it's not universal. Whereas I think presets or Capture One presets, whatever Capture One call them, I think they are more universal and they would be a lot more useful. And I think that would change things so much for people, because it would put a lot less reliance on editing and sitting in front of a computer. And let's be honest, we all have more fun when we're out with our cameras in our hands than when we're sat in an office like this. I think new cameras should also now include advanced imaging modes. It seems like something that would be quite easy to implement. Basically what I'm talking about is when you take a certain type of photo, say a pano, it's a series of photos, your camera should be able to recognize that you shot a pano and stitch them together in your camera. It should be able to recognize when you've taken a focus stacked image and stitched that together in your camera. It should be able to recognize when you've taken an HDR image, a bracketed image, and it should be able to pull that together as well. And even maybe a combination of them. Maybe you're doing a focus stacked HDR pano. It should be able to pull all those together as well. I have so many times where I take a pano and because I'm traveling or whatever else, weeks pass by and then I look at it in Lightroom and I'm not actually sure what I've done. If the camera could pull that together for me there and then that would save me so much time and bother. And there may be some cameras that do this that I'm just not aware of. I don't look too much at the new camera technology because frankly, a lot of the features aren't interesting to me. I don't need centipede eye tracking or 1,000 megapixels. But I think this is a feature that would really help photographers within their workflow. And talking of helping photographers in their workflow, a better menu system would be so advantageous to all of us, I think. Menu systems in cameras seem to be so convoluted and complicated. And I watched a video recently about the new Hasselblad release, the X2D, I think it is. And they've got a smartphone inspired UI with a touch screen, bunch of icons on the back. And it is very much like you press icons on a smartphone and go through the settings that way. And it's a bit of a change from what people are used to, but I think it is such an easier way of being able to change things through the menu. I remember shooting on a Blackmagic cinema camera a few years ago and that adopted a similar thing. And that seemed really innovative at the time, but no one's picked up on it. And I feel like we've got these overly complicated menu systems within cameras that could be simplified if the user experience was prioritized. Before I go on, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on what you'd love to see in a new camera. My hope is that someone somewhere sees this and takes on board the kind of things we're talking about. I think, as I've said, we're at a point where we don't need more resolution or better autofocus or better video features. Those things are now redundant and it'd be great to go back to actually solving the problems that we photographers are having. So if you've got any of those problems and you've got an idea for solving them, stick them below. The next one would be an absolute game changer to me. And I think this is one of the things that would convince me to potentially part with my cash for a new camera. And it's so simple, built-in storage. Imagine if you had a camera with 1 terabyte built-in storage. How much easier would that make your life? Well, the new Hasselblad X2D does have that, but that is a camera that is, to most people, prohibitively expensive. We need to see features like this trickling down to sort of the more consumer end of the market, I suppose. Given how long we've had internal memory the size we have in smartphones, it's a real surprise to me that this hasn't come over to cameras as well. It would just make life so much easier. How many times have you been on a shoot and you've got there and you've realized you've forgotten your memory card? I'm ashamed to admit that I've done that countless times. I did it a few weeks ago and I've been a photographer for over a decade. It still happens. The other thing that can happen with memory cards is they can corrupt. I had a memory card corrupt about 6 weeks ago. And these aren't cheap memory cards either. I use these super fast cards because of the video work that I do, and they basically work out at about £1 per gigabyte. So a 256 gigabyte card is quite an investment. I've got a terabyte drive in my camera. That's going to make life so much easier for me. If you're going on a long trip, then maybe you will fill that up, especially if you're doing video work. But we can have card slots as well. It would give us the best of both worlds, and it would just remove that reliance on what are now really expensive and not foolproof memory cards. And whilst I'm talking about internal features, I think newer cameras should have internal NDs. Some cameras do, like the Fuji X100V and the X100V1. They both have internal ND filters, which are absolutely great. And I'd love to see that brought across into other cameras as a feature. I mean, there might be a reason why it can't be done, just down to physics, but there must be something that can be brought in to shield the sensor and reduce the amount of light that's going into it. I feel like that must be something that is achievable for the camera manufacturers. And I think it would help photographers who like to use slower shutter speeds, and it would certainly help anyone that's working in video. I said it might get a bit more controversial later, but I honestly believe that the future of cameras will head this way, and that is towards voice control. I think we will end up in a world where you can say to your camera, you put it down, point it at a scene, and say to your camera, I want you to take this shot and I want everything to be sharp. Or I want you to take this shot and I want just that barn to be sharp. And your camera will be able to do it. It'd be great for being able to quickly change features, like asking it to change to a different crop mode or a different frames per second mode or a different filming mode. All those kind of things and make it really easy, and it would mean we don't have to spend as much time in those convoluted menu structures. Where it does get a little bit more controversial is if you ask your camera to take a shot and to have everything sharp and you've not physically touched the camera, where's that line between, is your camera taking a shot or have you taken a shot? I know a lot of people believe that you got to press the shutter button to take a shot. Obviously you've got to where you are, you've pointed your camera at it, so you are responsible for that shot. The camera couldn't have done that on its own. But this is where true AI might come in, and AI in camera terms at the moment is just used for marketing purposes. It doesn't really learn anything and it doesn't make its own decisions, and that is what true AI is from my limited knowledge of it. Are we going to get to a point where you put your camera down and maybe you are just assessing the scene and stuff, and all of a sudden your camera recognizes what's going on and thinks, okay, well, I know from past behavior, this is how that photographer operates, and it already takes that shot for you, and it knows you want everything front to back sharp, and it's already done it for you. It's taken that decision and made it itself and taken the shot for you. Whose shot's that? Anyway, I don't know how far we're off from that. That's not something I necessarily want to see in cameras, but the other features I absolutely do. If anyone from any of the main camera manufacturers does see this, I am happy to be employed as an R&D consultant. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time.